Imagine waking up tomorrow morning and discovering that money no longer works. Your bank card is declined. Your banking app refuses to load. ATMs are empty. Online payments fail. Across the world, millions of people stand frozen, staring at screens that display the same message: transaction unavailable. At first, people assume it's a temporary problem, maybe a system outage, maybe a cyber attack. But as minutes become hours, a disturbing realization begins to spread. The thing that modern civilization depends on most, trust in money, has suddenly disappeared.
Welcome to sleep time. Relax your head, pull up your covers, and rest your mind as we journey into a life without currency. Most of us rarely think about money itself. We think about what it buys: food, homes, fuel, comfort, security. Yet modern money is not gold, silver, or paper with inherent value. It is an agreement, a shared belief. Numbers on screens, digital records in distant computers, promises backed by governments, banks, and institutions. Every morning, billions of people participate in this invisible system without question. But what happens if that belief suddenly breaks? What happens when people stop trusting the numbers?
In the first few hours, life appears almost normal. Cafes open, buses run, offices fill with workers. But underneath the surface, cracks begin to appear. Shops cannot process payments. Fuel stations stop accepting cards. Delivery companies delay shipments. Small inconveniences begin multiplying into larger problems. A parent cannot buy medicine. A truck driver cannot purchase fuel. A business cannot pay suppliers. One by one, tiny interruptions spread through society like falling dominoes.
Modern civilization moves on invisible networks. Food does not magically appear in supermarkets. Fuel does not appear in stations by chance. Every product, every service, every item on every shelf is part of an enormous chain of transactions. Money acts like the blood flowing through that system. Remove it, and the entire body begins to weaken. Within a day, shelves start emptying. Long lines form outside banks. Rumors spread faster than facts. Anxiety quietly transforms into fear.
History gives us clues about what this might look like. During economic crises, hyperinflation, and banking collapses, societies have experienced moments when money stopped functioning as people expected. In some places, people carried bags of cash to buy a loaf of bread. In others, savings built over lifetimes vanished almost overnight. The details changed, but the lesson remained the same. Money only works when enough people believe it works. By the second day, people begin searching for alternatives. Some turn to cash, only to discover that cash itself has become uncertain. Others attempt to barter: fuel for food, batteries for medicine, skills for supplies. Suddenly, ordinary objects become valuable in new ways. A working generator is worth more than expensive jewelry. A bag of rice becomes more important than a stock portfolio. Society begins rediscovering a truth that modern life often hides. Value is not fixed. It changes with human needs.
Supermarkets become symbols of the crisis. The bright, organized aisles that once represented abundance now begin to empty. People rush to secure essentials, not because they are selfish, but because uncertainty changes behavior. Humans are deeply affected by fear of scarcity. Throughout history, survival has depended on securing resources before they disappear. When systems become unstable, ancient instincts return.
Governments would face impossible decisions. Leaders would appear on television urging calm. Emergency measures would be announced. Temporary systems might be created to keep food, energy, and healthcare functioning. But restoring trust is not easy.
Money is not only economics, it is psychology. Once doubt enters the system, rebuilding confidence can take months, years, or even generations. Financial markets around the world would freeze. Trillions of dollars in assets would become uncertain. Investors, companies, and governments all rely on the assumption that money tomorrow will behave similarly to money today. Remove that assumption, and planning becomes impossible. The future itself becomes unclear, and uncertainty, more than almost anything else, changes human behavior.
Yet, even in moments of crisis, something remarkable often appears.
Cooperation. Communities sharing supplies. Neighbors helping neighbors. Local groups organizing food, transport, and support. Throughout history, people have repeatedly shown that when systems fail, human relationships become more valuable than wealth. Trust shifts away from institutions and toward people standing directly beside us. This raises an uncomfortable question. What is money actually worth? A paper note has little value by itself. A number in a bank account is simply information. Money gains meaning because billions of people agree to treat it as meaningful. It is perhaps one of humanity's greatest inventions, a shared story so powerful that it allows strangers across continents to cooperate. But every shared story depends on belief. Nations depend on belief. Markets depend on belief. Companies depend on belief. Even laws depend on collective agreement. The day money stops working would reveal something extraordinary. That much of civilization rests not only on physical structures, but on invisible trust connecting millions of human minds. Imagine cities after several days of uncertainty. Streets quieter than usual. Fewer deliveries, reduced transport. Businesses closed. The pace of life slowing down. Many modern systems are designed for stability, not disruption. We rarely notice how complex civilization truly is because most of the time it works silently in the background. Some people would adapt quickly. Farmers with food, craftspeople with practical skills, communities with strong local connections. Crises often reveal that resilience comes not only from wealth, but from knowledge, relationships, and adaptability. The people best prepared are not always the richest. Sometimes they are simply those who understand how to solve problems when systems change. Technology would become both a solution and a challenge. New payment systems might emerge. Local currencies could appear. Digital alternatives might replace older systems. Throughout history, humans have repeatedly reinvented how value is exchanged. Shells, coins, gold, paper, digital numbers. Money has changed many times before, and it will likely change again. But perhaps the deepest impact would be psychological. Money gives people a sense of certainty. We save for the future. We plan. We invest. We imagine tomorrow based on what we own today. When money fails, people are forced to confront a difficult reality. Security is often more fragile than it appears. And yet, humanity has survived wars, collapses, disasters, and enormous changes before. Societies rebuild, systems evolve, new forms of trust emerge. The story of civilization is not a story of perfect stability. It is a story of adaptation. Again and again, humans have found ways forward. So perhaps the real question is not what happens when money stops working. The deeper question is, what remains valuable when it does? Food, knowledge, community, skills, trust, kindness, cooperation. These are forms of wealth that cannot be erased by market crashes or disappearing numbers on screens. Money has helped build cities, industries, technologies, and global trade. It has connected strangers across oceans and made modern life possible. But beneath every currency lies something older and more important: human belief. Without trust, money is paper, metal, or data. With trust, it becomes one of the most powerful forces in history.
The strange thing about money is that it isn't really money we're trusting. A banknote is just paper. A coin is a piece of metal. And the number displayed in your bank account is simply digital information stored somewhere inside a massive financial network. What gives these things value is collective belief. You believe the number in your account can buy food. The shop owner believes someone else will accept that money tomorrow. Governments promise to protect the system. Banks keep records. And billions of people participate without ever thinking about it.
For most people, the first signs would be almost invisible. A coffee shop might suddenly announce that its card machine isn't working. A petrol station might put up a handwritten sign saying cash only. An online store might stop processing orders. At first, people would shrug. Technology breaks all the time. But then, the problems would spread. Mobile banking would stop responding. Payment networks would fail. Employers couldn't process wages. Businesses couldn't pay suppliers. What began as an inconvenience would quickly become something much more serious.
Because modern civilization runs on transactions. Every loaf of bread, every liter of fuel, every truckload of vegetables, every shipment arriving at a port depends on someone being paid somewhere along the chain. Money is the invisible language connecting millions of separate activities. Remove that language, and the system begins struggling to communicate. A supermarket doesn't just need food on its shelves. It needs farmers, drivers, warehouses, refrigeration, electricity, workers, suppliers, and payments. Break the financial connection between them, and the entire chain begins to slow down. Then, something psychologically powerful would happen. People would begin hoarding. Not necessarily because they were greedy, but because uncertainty changes human behavior. When people don't know what tomorrow will look like, they try to control whatever they can today. They buy food. They fill containers with fuel. They collect batteries, medicine, bottled water, and anything else they believe might become difficult to obtain. The shelves begin disappearing faster than they can be restocked. Within hours, people would start heading toward banks. Some would want answers. Others would want their savings. But banks couldn't simply open their vaults and hand everyone their money. Modern banking doesn't work that way. Much of the money people believe they own exists as electronic records, rather than piles of physical cash waiting in a room. If the underlying financial system stopped functioning, the problem wouldn't simply be getting money out. The problem would be determining whether those numbers still meant anything at all. And suddenly, the things people once considered ordinary would become incredibly valuable. A generator could be worth more than a luxury watch. A truck full of food could be worth more than a house. Someone who knows how to repair machinery might become more valuable to a community than someone with millions sitting in an inaccessible bank account. When money disappears, value doesn't disappear with it. Instead, value becomes more direct. People begin asking a simpler question. What can this actually do for me?
History has shown us what happens when currencies lose their credibility. During periods of hyperinflation, people had watched prices rise so quickly that money becomes almost meaningless. Workers can be paid in the morning and discover that their wages buy far less by the afternoon. In extreme cases, people abandon currency entirely and begin exchanging goods directly. The lesson is simple. Money only works when people believe tomorrow's money will still have value. But imagine something even more dramatic. What if every currency in the world failed at the same time? No dollar, no euro, no pound, no yen, no digital balance anyone could trust.
there would be no obvious replacement. Governments might attempt to create emergency currencies. Banks could issue temporary credits. Communities might establish local systems of exchange. And very quickly, humanity would rediscover one of its oldest economic ideas: barter.
Barter sounds simple, until you try it at the scale of modern civilization. Imagine trying to trade a box of vegetables for electricity. How many vegetables should equal an hour of power? What if the person providing electricity doesn't want vegetables? What if they need medicine instead? Money solved this problem by becoming a universally accepted middle ground. Instead of trading one useful thing directly for another, people could trade almost anything for money, then exchange that money for what they actually needed. That may be one of the greatest reasons money became so powerful. It doesn't just represent wealth, it makes cooperation easier between complete strangers. A farmer doesn't need to know the person buying their wheat. A factory worker doesn't need to know the people purchasing the products they manufacture. Money allows millions of people who will never meet to participate in the same economic system. Remove it, and suddenly those invisible connections become much harder to maintain.
Governments would face an enormous challenge. They would need to keep hospitals operating, food moving, electricity flowing, and essential workers working. But how do you pay someone when the payment system doesn't work? Governments might begin issuing physical vouchers or emergency credits. Soldiers could protect supply routes. Fuel might be rationed. Food could be distributed according to need rather than purchasing power. For a brief period, the world's most advanced economies might begin looking surprisingly primitive.
The wealthy would discover something uncomfortable too. Wealth only provides security while the system recognizes it. A mansion cannot feed a family. A sports car cannot produce electricity. A billion-dollar investment portfolio cannot be eaten. In an ordinary world, money can be converted into almost anything. But if the conversion mechanism disappears, wealth becomes strangely trapped. The richest person in the room might suddenly depend on someone who knows how to grow vegetables.
The day money stops working may never come. Or perhaps one day, in some form, it will. But imagining that possibility teaches us something profound. Civilization is not held together only by roads, buildings, and machines. It is held together by invisible agreements, shared stories that billions of people choose to believe. And perhaps the greatest story of all is not money itself, but humanity's endless ability to create trust, rebuild systems, and begin again. Until next time, sweet dreams. Thanks for watching on Sleep Time.